To follow our discussion on Nancy's schemes, our next panel will discuss Prescription for Failure, the Ills of Socialized Medicine. Please welcome Whip Steve Scalise.
Good morning to all my friends at CPAC. Welcome. Are y'all fired up for 2020? You ready for November? Look, y'all know what is at stake. 2020 will be a contrast election, and there is no sharper contrast between the conservative principles and values that our country's built upon, what President Trump has done to deliver for families through individual freedom, and socialism on the other side that you can see on full display in these debates on the Democrat side. I hope they have a debate every other day, just so that the whole country can see every aspect of your lives that they want the government to take over. Do y'all want that? You don't want socialism. You surely don't want socialized medicine. And there is going to be no sharper contrast between these two battles, freedom versus government control, than health care. And so I know there's going to be a great panel in a few minutes that talks about health care, but I think we all need to be very clear in this election about what's at stake in our two sides. What President Trump has worked on with Republicans to give people more choices, more freedom, lower costs for health care. President Trump's talked very clearly about protecting people with pre-existing conditions while lowering costs and letting you make the decisions on health care. You and your doctor should be the ones making it, not some unelected bureaucrat in Washington. And then you look at the contrast. Look at what Bernie Sanders and others on the Democrat side are talking about. When they say Medicare for all, which in their plan they take away the private insurance that 180 million Americans enjoy, are you going to let them take away your health care choices? We're not going to let that happen. But that's what they want to do, and that's why it's important that everybody see what's on full display. Everybody sees the contrast between what we want to do, letting people have more freedom and more control and lower costs, versus what they want with the government taking control. 180 million people kicked off of private insurance, pushed onto a failed government-run system like Medicaid, and that's what it would look like. And seniors who enjoy Medicare, by the way, don't want another 180 million people in the same line with them. We need to save Medicare from bankruptcy, not throw 180 million more people onto that program. And I know there are a lot of you that are involved in the coalition against socialized medicine. I want to thank you for the work you've been doing with us to help people see this contrast. But let's also remember what we as conservatives stand for and what is going to be talked about a lot in the election, as President Trump has a great record to run on. President Trump has been leading the efforts on things like the VA choice to make sure our veterans not only have the best health care available to them, but if they can't get the kind of quality health care that they need from the VA, they have choices to go other places. They want to take that away too. Are we going to let that happen? No way. So President Trump's delivered on those fronts. President Trump led the effort when we had a House Republican majority to repeal the individual mandate. It's gone. We just repealed the medical device tax so we can finally bring more manufacturing of medical devices back into America. Those are great conservative wins. Nancy Pelosi wants to rip all that up. Y'all seen her. You know what she wants to do if she stays as Speaker. Is Nancy Pelosi going to be the Speaker of the House next year? When President Trump wins re-election, and again, this debate is going to be critical, because there were millions of people, about 8 million people who voted for President Trump in 2016, didn't show up in 2018. I can tell you this, I've been around with the president, the enthusiasm's never been higher. They're going to be showing up, and I think in even larger numbers for President Trump in 2020 because of what he's done to deliver and what we want to do working with him. And think about this. President Trump has not only talked about the things that he wants to do to lower health insurance costs, he's delivered for families. But we've been working in Congress. We actually had a bill come out of committee unanimously, every Republican and every Democrat, to lower drug costs. And Speaker Pelosi won't bring those bills to the floor. We'll surely bring them when we're in a Republican majority, working with this president who would sign those bills into law. And just to give you an example, There's something right now called pay to delay, where drug companies, when a drug's about to go to the market for generic, you know a generic drug similar to the original drug, but a lot cheaper. Well, the drug company today can pay the generic company not to make the generic. That should be illegal. We had a bill to make that illegal, and Speaker Pelosi won't bring that package of bills to the floor. So just imagine, you today could be paying lower costs for drugs. President Trump wants to sign that bill, and they won't bring it to the floor. We're going to turn that around. We're going to bring those kind of bills to the floor with the Republican majority, working with President Trump to get those things done. Surprise billing? We've got a lot of medical doctors in Congress. It's hard to be a doctor today with Obamacare, so a lot of those doctors left the practice and ran for Congress. Most all of them are Republicans, by the way. They want to work, and they've got really good ideas to lower health costs. They know the doctor-patient relationship is vital. They know that we don't want government control over health care because of what works great in this country. And I can tell you, I've gotten to see a lot of this, and so just a real good example of this, because health care is very personal to me. I would not be here today without the greatest healthcare system on the face of the planet. I'm surely not going to let them take that away from you or anybody else. And we don't want to go to a European model. We don't want to go to a Canadian model. In Canada, less than half the drugs that are available here in the United States, life-saving drugs, less than half of those are available in Canada because they have government controls, price controls. Might sound good on the surface until you see it in practice. Tens of thousands of Canadians come to America to get life-saving treatment in healthcare. Do you see a lot of Americans going to Canada to get that same treatment? Because you'd have to wait in the same lines as thousands of other people. So I got to travel 2 weeks ago to New Hampshire with President Trump. And there was this great rally, 11,500 people that are going to be almost as loud as y'all when President Trump speaks on Saturday. But one of the guys I met there who was campaigning for President Trump had a sign that said, "I fled Canada." And I went over and I talked to him, and he's a big Trump supporter, and he said, socialized medicine ran me out of Canada because I don't want the government telling me what to do and controlling my health care. We're not going to let that happen. Are we going to let them turn us into a socialist nation? No way. When President Trump says America won't be a socialist nation, amazing how in a State of the Union we all stand up. I get physical therapy. I get to jump up and applaud that. And you're watching all the Democrats sitting down. President Trump talks about killing terrorists, and all the Democrats sit down. I mean, look, I hope it's not a partisan issue, but if killing terrorists becomes a partisan issue, put me in the party that's for killing the terrorists. And I applaud this president for his leadership on so many issues: domestic policy, foreign policy, hottest economy in the world. Just look at yesterday at what he did, the leadership he took to address and tackle the coronavirus. Our next speaker in a little while is going to be the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, who he put in charge. And you cannot have a better person leading this effort, but it shows how serious the president is that he would put the vice president in charge, bringing the entire weight of the federal government to tackle this crisis, like he's done with so many others. But let me tell you, as I get ready to leave and this next panel comes out to talk about healthcare, healthcare is only one example of what's at stake in this election and the sharp contrast between conservative principles and government control. They want to do it on every aspect. They're talking about raising your taxes, everybody's taxes, not just the millionaires and the billionaires, like the people on stage in the Democrat primary, but hard-working families who are benefiting from the low taxes that we put in place with Republican House and a Republican Senate and a Republican president who signed it into law, lowering everybody's taxes. And look at how great it's working. It's working for everybody. We're not going to let them take that away, right? So when you think about this, government control, they want to take away your guns. Are we going to let them do that? No way. Are we going to let them take away our ability to drive whatever car we want? And if you want to put gasoline, if you want to put solar panel that runs your airplanes, they want to take away your airplanes. I mean, this is crazy what they're talking about. The Green New Deal, Medicare for all. It's about government control over individual freedom. And you know what? In 2020, individual freedom is going to win out. We will re-elect Donald Trump as our president. We'll get a Republican House with a Republican Senate and keep working to save this great nation. It's worth fighting for, and I thank you for being in this fight with us. Thank you so much, my friends at CPAC. God bless this great country. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Peter Pitts, David Schneider, Barbara Colm, and Mark Palazzo.
My name is Peter Pitts. Steve Scalise, a real American hero. Do you want one-size-fits-all medicine? Do you want Uncle Sam to morph into Uncle Sam MD? Do you want Uncle Sam MD to tell what doctor to give what medicines to your children? Do you want Dr. Bernie by your bedside? Hell no. Ladies and gentlemen, socialized medicine means rationing. Bernie Sanders wants it to mean no private insurance. In Canada, the Supreme Court ruled that having private insurance is a basic human right. Price controls equal choice controls. Health sharing and Liberty Health Sharing is in the House. Means you need to have the choice of programs that you want to fit your need, and socialism says no, not acceptable. Socialized medicine stifles competition and it stifles innovation. There are now 2 vaccines coming to the market for coronavirus, developed in the United States. And it's not because of socialism. We have a great panel for you today. We have Barbara Colm. Barbara is the president of the Friedrich Hayek Institute, or she says Fritz Hayek Institute in Vienna, and director of the Austrian Economic Center, a very smart lady. We have David Schneider, Dr. David Schneider, a leading orthopedist and the author of a new book, and he'll tell you, among other things, why socialized medicine killed Princess Diana. You heard it here first. And we have Mark Palazzo, who is the president of the Coalition Against Socialized Medicine, because we need to coalesce around this issue. So let's get right down to it. Barbara, one of the fastest growing trends in European healthcare is private insurance. What happens when the government replaces professionals in the delivery of healthcare?
You distort the market. Full stop. You destroy it. I mean, if you don't allow competition, then we're dead. And this is what we have seen. I'm so thankful to what Congressman Scalise just said when he mentioned that if we import price controls to Europe, from Europe to the United States, you will have socialized medicine here in the US. Trust me, we've seen it in Europe. This is no good. If we just look at the budgets of the Western European countries, you spend 2/3 on welfare and medicine, 2/3. So what is left for education, defense, and other important things? Not much. So be careful, don't fall into this trap of this centrally planned thing that we call socialized healthcare. And we have this in all of our European countries to a bigger and a lesser extent. But what everything has in common, it doesn't allow choice. You're forced to take whatever you get, unless, as you mentioned before, you're able to afford private insurance. And the issue is it's not a competition between private insurances and state insurance. No, you have to take this.
But Barbara, isn't it true that healthcare in Europe is free?
I've never seen something, such a free thing provided by government. I mean, as Lady Thatcher once said, eventually they take your money until they run out of it. It's taxpayers' money. It's our money that they take. So it's nothing for free. There is no free lunch in healthcare.
The other thing that you hear from democratic socialists either democratic or socialist or democratic socialist, is that there's a European system of healthcare that works beautifully for everybody. Is that anything other than just a lie?
Well, of course it works beautifully, but look at our budgets. Look at the debts we built on it. And we, as the taxpayers, have to pay for it. So in each and every country, the taxpayers pays more and more every year for each and every service you add. And you know, as we talk about markets, and there's a wonderful example, when General Clay and Ludwig Erhard abolished price controls in 1945, actually in 1948, the German economic miracle started. And
You mean government actually gets in the way of economic development?
Of course. I mean, doesn't this happen in the United States sometimes as well? I mean,
Depends who you ask.
exactly. And if you look at Europe and we have those huge bureaucracies, then, you know, it's there, trust me.
Excellent.
And you're still in a much better position, but we know we have to warn you.
Well, it's nice.
Don't copy-paste these ideas. They will destroy you.
Here, here. Thank you for coming here and telling the truth. It's in short supply.
Well, you know, and after all, it's a pleasure, but you know, we have to look at the moral high grounds of the markets versus politics, versus interest politics. And I think it's us, the individuals, who need the choice. And therefore, the moral high grounds are on our side.
And we need to own that.
Exactly. We
think
need to defend that
Congressman
individualism.
Collins said earlier, we need to get off our behinds and stop being so polite about this. This is really almost literally in healthcare a life and death situation for us.
I mean, if we look back, I mean, Adam Smith told us a couple of centuries ago that markets work. They work with the butcher, they work with the baker, and they work also with the pharmacist. So we should look at that, and they work with the consumer too, and the patient. So let's keep that in mind. Look at the laws of supply and demand. Nobel laureate Smith said those are God-given laws. Yeah. So we should keep that in mind.
So it's wealth and health of nations.
Yes.
David, you live and practice in Colorado.
Yes.
How would a system of socialized medicine, however you choose to define it, impact your ability to help patients?
Peter, it'd be insane. I'm a shoulder and elbow surgeon. I get to operate all over the world. I've traveled and I've taught courses all over. And so I engage with surgeons. I've been in operating rooms in Vienna, all over Europe, all over South America, all over Asia. And one thing we know is a truth, in socialized medicine, waiting times are disastrous. I just was with some group of Canadian surgeons. The Canadian healthcare system, the surgeons themselves are very well trained. A lot of them come to America for their fellowships. The average waiting time for someone to see a specialist in Canada in most provinces is 2 years.
2 years?
2 years. Then, and
2 years.
And this is coming from Canadian surgeons. There's no incentive for them to fib about this. And then, once they've seen the patient that they know needs a hip replacement, knee replacement, shoulder replacement, the time to get booked and have your operation is another 2 years. And this is province by province. This is what is waiting for Americans if we put up with this move to try and get socialized medicine. The people in this audience would go crazy if you were told you had to wait 4 months to see a specialist, right? You guys would have your pitchforks, flaming torches.
So no Americans in Vermont are getting on a bus to go wait online in Canada.
No, and this is what drove me crazy. I trained in Pennsylvania, and I treated a lot of Canadians. Those with means escape the Canadian system and come to America for the joint replacements. In Colorado, I still treat a lot of Canadians. So there's this escape hatch which allows them to come to America and not put up with this ridiculous system, which would, of course, make the waiting times even longer if everyone stayed trapped. We can't let ourselves be trapped.
And what are you hearing from your Canadian patients as to, how quickly did they make their judgment to get in their cars and drive to your studio?
It's pretty fast because, what in their mind, they know they have this condition, they're suffering, they can't work, they're not productive, their family needs them to pay the bills, and they can't get the care they need. Did you know that it's very comparable rates, if not worse, Canadians going bankrupt because of medical bills? It's this fallacy that it's only a problem in America. We know that the medical healthcare system in America is not perfect. I know that. And there are things that need to be done to improve it. But going socialized is not the answer.
So I have to ask you only because I mentioned it. You told me on the phone that socialized medicine is one of the causes of the death of Princess Diana. Could you explain?
Well, ironically, you guys saw Congressman Scalise, who is a true American hero after he got shot by that Bernie bro, right? He was treated with just excellence from the moment his injury occurred. Law enforcement was there. He got life flighted out of there, had surgery immediately. They saved his life. It's a miracle he's alive. It's a miracle he can walk after everything he went through. Almost 20 years ago to the day, 20 years to the day before his injuries when Princess Diana was in that car accident in France. They actually don't have any trauma specialists in France. French shoulder surgeons are amazing. I'm friends with plenty of them, but they don't have trauma heritage there. And so for the first hour after her accident, she was still in that car, in that tunnel, in Paris for an hour, and then after an hour took her to a nearby hospital, and she was alive for another 3 hours, and they couldn't control the bleeding from her pulmonary artery.
Because?
Because there were no trauma-trained people there, and because of the delay. We know there's this golden hour that all trauma patients must be treated. And if I really believe, knowing what I know about her care and comparing it to what Congressman Scalise had, Princess Diana would have lived had that accident happened here in America.
Well, that's another episode of The Crown. Mark, the Coalition Against Socialized Medicine.
Yes.
I think we all understand why we need that. People talk about Medicare for all, people talk about a Medicare option, people talk about drugs from Canada, a whole variety of crazy things. You're talking to elected officials, you're talking to opinion leaders. What do they want to know? What moves them on this issue?
Well, what we tell them is the threat is real. I mean, we're in a very, very serious fight, and if any of you are subjecting yourself to the circus of the Democratic debates, you're seeing that the bad idea of socialized medicine used to be on the fringe of the Democratic Party. It's now in the mainstream of the Democratic Party. You're disqualified for running for president as a Democrat if you're not for socialized medicine of some form. So this threat is real. It looks like the leading candidate on their side is the godfather of socialized medicine. So all of us need to take this threat very, very seriously.
That's an offer that we can and must refuse.
Absolutely. But what's alarming and scary is the polling on this issue. When we do a fair amount of polling, just got done with some in New Hampshire, when you poll on this issue and ask people about socialized medicine, they think it's a good idea. The numbers are good for them. And that's the problem. But the devil's in the details. When you start to communicate to folks that it's going to cost $32 trillion over 10 years,
Write your check.
that if you have private health insurance that your union may have negotiated for you, you're going to lose it. If you're on Medicare, you're not going to have Medicare. In terms of price controls, never worked in any sector. But if we institute price controls, we're the R&D for the world in the United States. So that's going to basically shut down any development of new medicines and new cures. You know, your quality of care is going to go down. And at the end of the day, the government's going to dictate choices for your health care. So when we poll and add that information, the numbers move dramatically. So the bad news for us is, on the surface, when they run out with the line, you know, Medicare for all is a great idea, we're losing. But ultimately, we can win the fight. We just got to educate folks, and that's what our coalition.
Well, let me pick up on that, because one of the things that Bernie and his ilk are against are patents. Patents deliver innovation. Patents deliver competition. Barbara, you're the expert here. What happens when you erase competition and intellectual property rights from healthcare?
Well, then you destroy capitalism. Patents is nothing else as the protection of property rights. And to have and to protect property rights is what you in the United Nations and in the US have done for your ever since you exist. Whereas we in Europe, we don't care about property rights anymore, and this is why we don't care about capitalism. And without capitalism, we don't create wealth. We are not innovative. We are not better than any others. We don't outperform others, and we are not what we want to stand for. We are not free, in short. and not independent. And that's, I think, what everybody here in this room wants to be.
You know, for many, many years, the language of science, certainly the language of pharmaceutical, was German.
Well,
It isn't German anymore, is it?
It is not, because German companies had to go away. They all left Europe because of the bad conditions for them, not only because of tax, but what is most important, and you mentioned it briefly, innovation, research and development. This is here in the United States now, and guess who creates jobs? It's those enterprises.
I might jump on that, Peter. You know, the medical device industry in America is one of the great manufacturing sectors in the world. The medical device industry is a massive net exporter in our country. Do you know, if you're an American here and you've had your joint replaced, it is a guarantee that that joint replacement was made in America. There is no American who's getting hip replacement, knee replacement, shoulder replacement that was made in Asia. Not at all. Asia is a massive importer of our medical devices, our cardiac stents, our joint replacement, our pacemakers. It employs hundreds of thousands of Americans, and it's based on that intellectual property that allows us to be that research engine that drives the world.
So Bernie Sanders said that we should replace the patent system with a prize system. So you come up with a great idea, a new device, a new drug, pick your product, and you'll get paid for that. And then the rights go to the government. You know where that's worked, ladies and gentlemen? Nowhere. The last time I can remember a patent being taken from an award was Robert Goddard's rocketry patents. And you know, for Goddard, that didn't work out so good. You know, so Mark, just kind of back to you. Do our elected representatives, do our thought leaders, can they put together all these pieces and go beyond the sound bites?
Oh, they get it. There's no question they get it. We're fortunate to have the folks we have, like Steve Scalise in Congress, because they're in there fighting every day, and we're doing what we can to support them. But you know, I met a gentleman last night from Canada here. He's going to speak, I think, Saturday. And I said, "How's the health care?" He said, "It's awesome. I pay $25. I get this great card. It's only bad when I get sick." So, you know, it's a challenge, and I know everyone in this room, all of us face health challenges, either personally or with our families. It's a difficult thing. And my own personal experience, I have a daughter who 5 years ago was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, stage 4 thyroid cancer. Very suddenly, she was in her senior year at college at TCU. And my wife and I, fortunately my wife's a nurse, we had to react quickly because the endocrinologist said she needs surgery immediately. So when we got over the stage of being stunned, we immediately sought out the best doctors we could, and specifically the best surgeons we could, identified those folks, and literally went and interviewed them. We live in Austin, Texas, and we're close to MD Anderson in Houston, which was very fortunate for us. We identified great doctors who did surgery on my daughter. They literally wheeled her in at 6 a.m. They told us that, "Mark, we'll be done by noon." At 1:30, they came out, and the surgeon told me, "I've got 3 more hours to go. This is the worst case I've seen in 30 years, and your daughter's had cancer since she was a very little girl." My wife and I were obviously stunned and tried to process that information, but the moral of the story is this. The surgery was 10 hours. She was healthy. 5 years out, she's cancer-free. She's working on the Hill for a congressman, and she's graduating from Georgetown in 6 months with a master's degree.
Congratulations. So let me pick up a point there, and let me kind of, Barbara, direct this to you. So here's a guy, just a guy. His wife happens to be a healthcare professional. They're in a difficult situation. They get the chance in Texas, in the United States, to interview surgeons, oncological surgeons. They get the chance to interview them. Doesn't that happen all the time in Europe?
No. You enter a hospital and then you see Dr. X or Dr. Y, unless you have a private insurance, unless you make sure that you are educated enough to make the choice and organize it yourself. It's not the way that it works here in the United States. So the thing, and talking about
at
cancer.
Present.
Exactly, at present, thank you. And talking about cancer, there is lots of evidence and studies that cancer patients have to wait a very long time, months sometimes, until they're able to get treatment. And those months are very dangerous because, with cancer.
And your daughter was on the precipice
with
here.
Cancer,
Absolutely.
you work immediately. You have to react immediately. But, socialized healthcare doesn't allow that. So the queues are literally there, not only in British hospitals, in French hospitals, even in German hospitals. And everywhere where we have this system, it's very bad for the consumer, for the patient.
David, I want to pursue this patient choice proposition. So we have health insurance, which many hundreds of millions of Americans have. We have health sharing, which is increasingly a solid choice for many Americans. But you get to make that choice. You get to decide what you need in your life. David, relative to a lot of your patients, nobody's planning far in advance to blow out their shoulder,
Right.
or blow out their elbow, or blow out their knee. When it happens, it requires immediate action.
Right.
What happens when you say, you know what, that's awful, I'm sorry you're in pain, here's a Band-Aid,
Right.
I'll see you in 2 years.
Can you imagine that? I mean, if you knew that you've just been told, look, your knee is so far gone, the arthritis is so advanced, it tends not to slowly creep up on patients. And anyone who's had their knee replaced, an audience will say, yeah, that's right, my knee kind of hurt, but then all of a sudden one day I couldn't take the pain anymore, it was terrible. I think the bottom point is this. For several days here at CPAC, we're going to be talking about socialism versus America versus freedom. And
Versus choice.
Versus choice. And nothing is more personal than your own body, your own health, and the health of your loved ones. And some of these things are pie in the sky, and the thought of maybe someone's losing their patent rights, you can't really feel it, but can you imagine in your bodies, if the government's going to get in control and tell you who you have to go to? We've been fibbed to before that you can choose your doctor, right? We all were told that lie. Imagine taking it up of many notches, that you're going to have to follow and obey and do what doctor says.
So this becomes, if you like your health insurance, if you like your doctor, you can keep it as long as we say it's okay. Or as long as they're on the list, some magic government list.
Right.
Right? Mark, let me go back to you. So a lot of times during the Democrat debates, you'll hear, well, we want to level the playing field. But what they mean is they want to level the playing field with dynamite and atomic weapons. What about a Medicare option? People say, that sounds pretty fair. But what people don't understand is if you allow the government to provide health care, to sell health care across state lines, but private insurance can't do that, what about allowing private insurance companies to maximize the economy of scale and sell policies across state lines? Somehow that additional soundbite is not getting through. What's the, how do we break through this bubble of bullshit?
Well, you're talking logically now, so logical and the Democrats in the same sentence, but I'm going to tell everyone a secret in here, and don't tell anybody. All the Democratic candidates want to get to single payer eventually. That's the goal, that's the objective. It's long been their objective.
Say
Yes,
that
it
again.
is.
It's centrally planned.
Say that again.
All of those candidates, Mayor Pete, whatever his last name is, all the Biden, the whole crew, they all have the same agenda. Bernie wants to start faster and be more dramatic to be politically expedient. Buttigieg and Biden and the others are saying, well, you'll have an option to buy insurance, in a private way, which is not real, and they want to get to single payer eventually. So that's why don't believe any of that narrative. They're going for it all. That's why this fight is serious. That's why we need everyone in this room engaged on it.
Barbara, back on a more economic level. Let me exaggerate for a moment. Innovative drugs and devices not coming from Europe. Investment dollars not going to Europe. Talent coming into the US. What am I missing here?
Well, we are in a damn difficult situation. To be honest, we will end up probably as the history and tourism center if we don't wake up. We have made a lot of mistakes in the past. Most of them were all with this socialist idea of making everything the same, one size fits all, and it doesn't. Because we are all individualists. We all have our different talents, we have our different issues, And it doesn't work if you provide the same solution to everybody. We need different individual solutions, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, whether it's in transport. This is so
it seems as though Europe, broadly defined, Austria certainly, they've somehow managed to successfully disincentivize all of these things. Why?
Well, there was a
What was the plan?
There was a reason why Hayek wrote The Road to Serfdom in 1944.
You got Road to Serfdom, actually written for humans to read, short, worthwhile.
Just use the Reader's Digest version and look at the cartoons. They are still up to date. So what he wrote back then is careful what centrally organized institutions, left-wing states, socialists and communists want.
So the road,
they will destroy you.
So the road to socialized medicine is the superhighway of the road to serfdom.
Exactly. So this is why we need to be very careful and don't fall into this trap and not make the same mistakes as the Europeans have made, because it costs you dollars and dollars and dollars.
So wait a minute.
Look at the European budgets. I only have to say that.
You're saying we should actually look to Europe to learn what not to do.
Exactly. Exactly. Don't fall into those traps. Don't make the same mistakes, because you want to outcompete other nations. You want to be better than other nations, and you don't want to be the middle.
I like that a lot better than looking to Cuba for what to do.
Come on. It's just because you like the sun.
Well, you know, there's value in getting a nice tan. But
Yeah.
you know, so David, your patients come in. What if you said to them, you know, we have to wait for the MRI, but I've looked at your MRI, and you know, I can't really use these new devices that are available. I'll have to kind of use the old-fashioned stuff. How quickly would they stay in your office?
They'd lose their mind. By the way, so there are 11 million Cubans, and in the entire country there are 4 MRI machines, none of which are modern, right?
In Cuba?
Yeah, in Cuba, in the country of Cuba. There are 4 MRI machines within a mile of here, probably. One thing I realized in the writing of my book, The Invention of Surgery, is that there's always been a world capital of medical innovation. And you know, it used to be the ancient Greeks, and then it went to Italy, and then for a while, late 1800s, it was Germany and Austria. Barbara knows that I'm a huge fan of Vienna. Then World War II happened. The world headquarters, the place where all the innovation was happening, was America. And while that happened, you had transistors invented and plastics invented and modern metal alloys were invented, all American, and that all happened in America, pacemaker and those advanced kind of joint replacements. It's an American miracle that this implant revolution happened, and we can't get in the way of that because we're on the cusp of even greater inventions.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes left, and I'd like to ask each of you a question, and Mark, let me start with you. What is it going to take to get our side of the conversation off of basically, like Doug said, being boring? You know, when are we going to get off of our duffs and start telling the harsh truths here?
Oh, it's a challenge because, you know, we're the heartless people that don't want to give everyone quality health care. So it's a challenge. So as I said earlier, the good news is when we go to those other arguments and get people to focus and listen on to those other points, we win. So that is the challenge. And organizations like ours are trying to amplify those themes and be aggressive. Certainly our members of Congress, everyone in this room has a part to play on this issue. We need everyone's help. Just keep communicating with folks and say, look at it. What does it really mean, and what does it really involve?
So what's the message to these people in this room? They're engaged, they're hungry, they're aggressive, they're smart. What should they be telling their elected representatives?
They should be telling them to oppose, obviously. They don't want to pay higher taxes. They don't want to lose their private insurance. They want to have control of their medical decisions for them and their family. They don't want bad price controls to stifle innovation. And they want to have quality health care. And none of that can be achieved through the Bernie program. No way.
Thank you. Barbara. High taxes, mediocre care, central planning. When's it going to change? When's it going to change in Europe? When are you guys going to get with the program?
When we hit the wall. I hope not. But you missed one thing: lack of innovation.
And lack of competition.
Yes.
And so when you look at the US, do you see innovation? Do you see competition? Do you see a system that rewards that?
Yes,
And we have to protect it.
I still do. And as an economist, I look at the facts and figures and numbers. And if we look at those and compare those, then you outperform many other nations. And I just tell you, keep outperforming, first of all, and second, even get better and not fall into the traps that we have done in Europe by repeating the same mistakes over and over again. It doesn't help. You don't find solutions just because you do one thing once again and you knew it didn't work out 10 years ago or 20 years ago and you try again. It still won't work.
So we don't want to import drugs, we don't want to import socialism, and we don't want to import a lack of innovation and competition.
Exactly, that's the most important.
David, you're actually suiting up every day.
Yep.
You know, what's going to help you do a better job going forward? How can government help?
Allow competition. You know, we believe in life,
Wait.
liberty, the pursuit of happiness. John Locke says life, liberty, and property. We can't let people impede upon our life and liberty.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Palazzo, Barbara Combe, David Snyder, thank you very much.